Hey guys, welcome to the Reimagined Energy Podcast, a weekly renewable energy podcast featuring interviews with those who are leading the way in sustainability and clean technology. I'm your host, Maria McGowan, and I'm super excited and a little bit nervous to kick things off today. Joining me in today's episode, we're talking to Emma Jarratt of Electric Autonomy Canada. They write original journalism about anything electric vehicles. So we'll be talking about fleet vehicles, EV myths, and also what the job market is looking like for EVs. So let's get started. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm here with Emma Jarratt, Executive Editor at Electric Autonomy Canada, who loves to write and talk about anything supply chain, zero emission, and also anything electric that moves. So thanks for joining me today, Emma. Great to have you here.
Great. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So you're with Electric Autonomy. And so tell me a little bit about what your organization is and what your plans are for the future.
We're a business-to-business news platform covering zero-emission transportation. So anything from one wheel, theoretically, to a jumbo jet that runs on zero-emission fuel, in quotes. That can be including battery electric, hydrogen, and we even cover a little bit of alternative fuels for lower carbon emitting purposes.
Interesting. So you do a lot of original journalism. All the stories and emails that you write are all done by you guys.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Because I'm an early adopter of electric vehicles. And so early on, I remember following Electric Autonomy and reading your articles that you're writing. And you're really grasping the future. And you're also very much doing a great job covering what's happening in Canada. And so, it's really great. So the early adopters, like me, 3.5 years, I guess that's early enough. But, there was a lot of curiosity. There was a lot of people who were like, oh, wow, look at your car and asking questions, and people were passionate and excited. So I'm finding there's a little bit of a change, but I just want to hear it from you. Like, what are today's EV owners like?
I mean, I would argue they're still passionate.
Yeah.
about their choice to go zero emission transportation. But really, the short answer is they can be anybody. I think several years ago we were seeing, a really specific slice of society, not only able to afford EVs, but living in an area where they could have access to stock and had the time to educate themselves. Now I think EVs are becoming more accessible to a wider group of people. We see, tons of models coming out that apply to all different lifestyles and increasingly price points, which is nice to see.
Yeah, there's a nice variety now. And, as more and more car companies have a mandate of sorts to produce more electric vehicles.
Yeah, the mandate that came through first at the provincial levels in Quebec and BC, and then wider across Canada, the federal level are the really significant signals to the market, not only just the business market, but also to the general public, that this is the direction that we are moving as a country. And I hope that getting those clear signals in the form of a mandate and also through rebates brings the average consumer a bit more sense of security and comfort about a transition to something new. Our human nature is that we don't love new things. We like to stick with what we know. EVs are new. They're not scary, but they do require a bit of an adjustment, and having that governmental level hand holding, I think, is important for everybody.
It's a little bit reassuring there as well. One question I'm going to sneak in though is about the infrastructure. that's on everyone's minds. They're worried about range anxiety. What if my battery runs out and I'm in the middle of nowhere? I mean, we have to worry, and there's some concerns there with the infrastructure that is coming. It's being built.
There are, and I mean, not to cut you off, but I'm a realistic optimist. I live in a densely populated area, just outside Toronto. I don't have that struggle to access charging infrastructure in my day-to-day commuting, but that's a point of privilege for me. I'm not going to pretend for a second that, once you get into very remote areas and, even going north of Toronto, you start to notice the charging stations are more spread out. They are there, but, they're not as prevalent as gas stations. And I agree. The infrastructure is coming every, month that goes by. I certainly notice an improvement, but I think not having the same type of visibility that people are familiar with gas stations being on every corner is going to take, it's another level of adjustment. Charging stations are likely not going to be located like gas stations are. It's just a different way of integrating them into our existing, city infrastructure or rural infrastructure.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that often the recharging stations are kind of attached to existing, stations as well, gas stations, but they're often somewhere, usually around near a restaurant or somewhere like that. Because if you're going to be there, you're going to be there for a few minutes, not just, gas up and go. So it's really, it's great. I mean, I have no regrets having an electric vehicle, and I think I'm dedicated for life for as long as they're around. But we talked earlier and we shared some thoughts about fleet vehicles, where companies and organizations are making that investment. Did you want to expand on that a little bit?
Fleet vehicles in Canada are a really promising area of transition. Definitely, we are seeing a lot more availability of some key types of vehicles, from last mile delivery box vans to pickup trucks, which are a really important fleet vehicle for a lot of commercial operators. The equivalency between gas or combustion rather, and electric vehicles is great, much more than it was even a year ago, and probably much more than a lot of fleet operators today imagine it could be. That's what we're hearing from industry experts who, study the fleet compilation. Yes. uh, and assess which vehicles are appropriate to transition or not.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So there's a growing demand for entire supply chains to be green. So do you want to expand on that a little bit?
So the signals that are being sent, and right now it's heavily emphasized overseas, but I'm thinking particularly in Germany is the one that pops into my mind. Really becoming very stringent for auto manufacturers. The OEM knowing exactly how much carbon goes into every nut and bolt in the vehicle, and having that total transparency across your supply chain. They want to know every carbon emission amount for every piece that goes into the vehicle. So there is a lot of pressure on automakers to lower their emissions wherever they can. So that takes us all the way back, when you're talking about a battery electric car, to even getting the minerals out of the ground to make the battery, because as they move along the value chain, they're accruing, a little bit of carbon here and a little bit of carbon there. And then you get to the end. And if you're not careful, it can be quite an intensive process actually to create that battery. Everyone is aware of this. And, Canada has really, I think, taken some intelligent steps to make sure that our supply chain is quite green and is getting greener, so that we are able to go into the global marketplace and say, sure, you can get your minerals elsewhere in the world, but what we can offer that maybe those other places aren't able to as effectively is a super clean supply chain. And that is a very attractive feature for companies, OEMs that are under this pressure to have a green supply chain to make sure that the vehicle at the end meets those requirements.
All right. So what does OEM stand for?
An OEM is an original equipment manufacturer. So any company that is making equipment, basically, in this case, an automaker.
Like vehicle manufacturer, like Toyotas or
Ford, Tesla, Hyundai, Toyota, those are all automakers or OEMs.
gotcha. Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that. So true or false? EVs can't survive the winter.
I'm going to go with false on that
Yeah.
one. Yes. I mean,
I will too. But yeah. So you say your reason and I'll tell you mine.
well, I mean, we had a blizzard here last night or yesterday afternoon, and my kids were out and I needed to run some errands. Not deterred by the weather, I climbed into my EV and, did errands for 2.5 hours in the snow, in the freezing rain, blowing wind, very cold, no problem. It's I'm a one car family. It's
Yeah.
it's EV or nothing, and
Yeah.
I've never had a problem actually getting around in my EV in the winter. And we have extreme temperatures here.
We do.
Not as extreme as Edmonton, but
No, but it's all about preparation. I think when you have an electric vehicle, you'll kind of learn the tricks along the way, and you're watching your consumption, and you're always watching your battery percentage and how much you have. So if you know you're going to be making a lot of errands in the afternoon, charge up in the morning or charge up the night before. So you're just kind of thinking ahead a little bit, and that's
yeah.
fine.
I mean, I used to really, I was very freaked out when I first had my car about, the range. And then, it took a couple of weeks of just driving around to realize that, like, oh, I actually go nowhere. my daily commute, even with running kids around, with doing errands, the odd trip I'll have to take that's a bit longer to get to, a press conference across the city, it can all be managed. Again, like coming from a place where I do have access to a lot of public charging, which is nice, and charging at home, which is I'm really lucky. It's not something that I find as a struggle. I think that actually probably the thing I forget to do the most is just put the car in the plug it in at the end of the night or so it charges overnight, and then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I forgot to do that. But it's not really much different than a gas car. Even putting there's a whole battery maintenance component with owning an EV where when it gets to a cold temperature, it's better for the battery if you keep the car plugged in overnight, just trickle charge it. And I think that some people, when they hear that, can think, oh, that's so annoying. I don't want to have to do that. And that's an extra thing at the end of my day when I'm already busy. And the thing is, though, I mean, if you're fortunate enough to have a garage or a covered spot where you're going to put your car anyway, or even a driveway, it's nothing to just plug it in at the end. Like, you're finished for the day.
No,
Plug the car in, and it's actually not that much of an onerous step.
It's really not. You plug in your iPhone, you plug in your car. I mean, it's kind of the same. No.
Yeah. So it's just that it's getting over that mental hurdle of rejigging your life so that you don't go to the gas station, which actually, when you think about it, saves you a tremendous amount of time in and of itself. I mean, if you're going to the gas station 2 or 3 times a week, it's what, a 5-minute, detour to time. Those minutes,
Exactly.
do it over the year, start to add up, and you're really just getting time back.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's very important. So with electric vehicles and with fleets and with supply chain, there comes probably a lot of job opportunities that are out there. there's going to be people who need to fix, or even though there's not a lot of moving parts, but you know, it's probably a really great career path to take.
It absolutely is. I just moderated a panel a couple weeks ago talking about that exact issue. And really, the point we're at now is that if you are a student looking to either choose your university program or you're graduating from a trade, you're in a really good spot. We are in a talent vacuum right now where everybody is looking to just hoover in young, talented, skilled people who understand everything from, how to install an EV charger, on the electrician side, all the way through to quantum computing, where, that technology is being used to test battery mineral compositions to hopefully make the next generation batteries in Canada. It is definitely an employee's market in terms of finding a job in this industry. And it's not just with cars. This isn't just about working with vehicles. This includes, utilities and engineering, mining, even trade relations. There's so many different avenues of employment that a transition to zero emission mobility touches, that you could really go into just about anything and still be linked back to EVs somehow.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm all for that. That'd be great. So, and then it's interesting, with the popularity of EVs, in Q4 2022, you were saying Canada reached 10% of new EV sales. So, what do you think that tells us?
It tells us that what we are doing is working. Slowly, steadily, we're seeing, these incremental steps. And right now I would say like we're creeping by inches. It would be really nice if we could, take a really big lunge forward. But I'm sure that will come as, supply chain issues are worked out. We're starting to see those improving, like the pressure that OEMs were under on the supply chain is now finally starting to ease a bit. And education initiatives are helping the general public, general consumers, and actually commercial consumers like fleet managers and operators to understand what their options are. Are we going to be like Norway in, the very near future? Doubt it. But, we will chart our own path. And I'm confident that there are enough brains and people working on the various bottleneck challenges, whether it's, charging infrastructure or sorting out the issue of how to get charging available to people who live in multi-unit residential buildings or condos. These key pinch point areas. Our EV adoption curve will match how well we're working on those other problems.
Oh, that's interesting. And, bringing it back to, electric autonomy, where do you look to for your stories or for your editorial side of it? I'm just curious of what trends or patterns are you noticing right now? We mentioned fleet, we mentioned green technology. So are there any other areas that you're finding, from your research?
I think that the recent geopolitical upheavals around the world and various countries that, we've all relied on for a long time to supply us with goods have really put a red underline under this issue of wanting to be self-sufficient. So our supply chain is having a lot of work done on it right now for EVs, yes, but also a lot of other goods and services. So I think that is a trend that I'm seeing, that, there's an enormous amount of time and energy and money being put into shoring up our supply chain and bringing as much of it back within, our borders as we can. And then as well, drawing in countries that, maybe didn't know or didn't see that Canada as a viable place for them to do business, drawing them in to say, hey, look, we have some extra space. It's finite. So if you want to get in now. But we're a great place to set up your piece of the puzzle, whatever it is.
Right.
Um, and in terms of other trends, I think that, and where we get our stories, a lot of it is very organic. It's responding to queries that people send in to us about, struggles they're having with their EV, or questions that they have about EVs in general, or lots of questions about supply chain accountability. That's the other, I think for a lot of people, we were talking about what motivates, what the average customer is for an EV, and everyone has their different motivations. But I think a lot of people choose an EV because they feel it's the healthier choice for them, for the environment. There's a real, environmental conscious attached to it. So they want to be sure that, they actually are making a purchase that's going to support a healthier, greener world. And those are great questions. That it's challenging for us to track down the answers. I think for me, at least, I'm always smarter when someone has written in and asked a question and, pushed back on something, or just given a different angle on the topic. And, we're one of those news platforms that likes to individually go through each comment and respond as best we can. We feel that our role in this is, an educational resource. Yes, news is all about disseminating information and, highlighting the actual raw news that's happening. There was a press conference, or there was a, ribbon cutting. But also, we want to be a value-added educational resource for Canadians.
Well, that's all great. And I encourage anybody who's listening or watching or both to subscribe to Electric Autonomy. Even if you're curious about EVs or you're doing your homework or research, I think it's a really great resource. It certainly helped me, when I was learning all about this world. So it's great. Continue the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Well, thanks for joining me. And, if anybody who's watching or listening, please send in your thoughts about today's podcast. We'll make sure that we're listening and we respond. And thanks for your time, Emma. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having me on, and I'm very pleased to talk about all of this with you.
That's a wrap. Thanks again to Emma for joining me today. This episode was sponsored by Smart Energy, Canada's clean technology event that's taking place in Halifax, Nova Scotia this spring. Be sure to register. I'm Maria McGowan. Thanks so much for listening, and join me next time